Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel ATP Finals 2022 preview. And we're going to preview the first match of the round robin in the green group, which is Casper Ruud versus Felix Auger Aliassime. So, the number 4 player in the world versus the number 6 player in the world in Felix. And it's going to be an interesting one because the head-to-head actually stands at 2-1 in favor of Casper Ruud and 3-2 overall if you include challengers. We'll go through their most recent meetings and we'll go through all of them because why not? Before we get into it, remember to that like button and do subscribe if you are new. If you're listening on a podcast platform, do leave a rating or review. Thank you to everyone that has done so. I can see that people have been, and it really does help us grow. So we do appreciate it. And we're growing all over the world through so many different territories. It's incredible to see. Okay, let's get into this. What we're going to do first is we're going to break down, we're going to do a few things. The first thing we're going to do is look at the head-to-head between the two players, look at their previous meetings. Then we're going to talk about their form, I guess, going into this ATP finals as well. And then I'm going to talk about it from a tactical standpoint. So how I think both players need to play in order to win, what we might end up seeing, what might end up transpiring, and then ultimately give you my prediction as well. So let's go into then the matches they've played in the past. So the two challenges that I mentioned were one in France, one in Italy. As you can see there, Felix winning in 3 sets against Casper Ruud, and then then Ruud winning in straight sets against the Canadian. Since then, they've played main ATP events. So one in Miami, which of course is a massive event, and Felix came out on top in 3 sets. And then in Madrid on the clay, Ruud came out on top, which isn't a surprise there. Those two results, not surprising. The most surprising result, I think, is this year in Montreal in Canada before the US Open, is Ruud winning in straight sets against Felix. Now, I say surprising, but of course he went on to make the final of the US Open. So not that surprising, right? I guess you could say. Generally, I think people before I think if we're talking about this matchup, from Wimbledon, at Wimbledon or before Wimbledon this year, we're saying that Felix is the better hardcore player and that he should be winning this matchup on a hard court, whether it's outdoor or indoor. But since then, Ruud has had these really impressive wins on hard court, including making the final of the US Open, of course, and playing some incredible tennis on the way to that final. And he is now rightfully, being seen as a threat on the hard courts. But that then takes us nicely into recent form. So Felix has been in incredible form. I mean, he won 16 matches in a row, including 3 consecutive titles before losing to Holger Rune in the semi-finals of Paris. Of course, Holger Rune went on to win the tournament, beating Novak Djokovic in the final in impressive fashion. Felix had actually beaten him the week before in the final of Basel in the indoor tournament there and beat him in straight sets. So I'm not going to say that the reason he lost is because of fatigue, because I don't know 100% obviously how he was feeling, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was at least a factor when they played, which, is, I think, understandable. Although Holger Rune has also played a lot of tennis, in fairness. So either way, it wasn't a shameful loss because Holger Rune went on to win the tournament. It was a semi-final. He'd beaten the week before. So look, either way you look at it, he is arguably, is he argued or is he? I reckon he is the most informed player at the moment, Felix, at the moment. I genuinely feel that. I guess you could say Holger Rune because he just won Paris, but he's not going to be at the ATP finals. So of the 8 players at the ATP finals, although he might play if someone pulls out through injury, of course, but of the 8 players at the ATP finals, I think Felix Auger Aliassime is the most informed player. He's the most dangerous player. I personally, like if I was a tennis player, which I'm not a professional tennis player. If I was to go to the tournament and someone asked me who's the most informed player that you would like, in your opinion, and who would you least like to face? Informed player Felix. Now, least like to face, I might say someone like a Djokovic or Nadal, but in actuality, I think it is Felix, genuinely, because he's just been playing that well on the indoor hard courts. And we'll talk about that more in detail when we do the strategic matchup section of this video. For Casper Ruud, he's had a very interesting last few weeks. In all honesty, of course, as you can see, he made the final of the US Open. Then played a couple of matches. Labour Cup, fine, good win there against Jack Sock, very tight one though. Jarry of Chile in Seoul won that one, but then lost to Nishioka and then went on a 3-match losing streak, you can see here. So lost in the second round of Seoul, first round of Tokyo, second round, depending, because I think he would have got a bye, of course, against Munar, and then Wawrinka in Basel. Now, Wawrinka, of course, went on to a pretty good run and actually had match points against Holger Rune in Paris in the first round. He was the only player to really push Holger Rune that far in the first round there as well, albeit. So, he's obviously in some very good form, but in saying that, that's a match you expect Ruud to win. And then in Paris, he beat Casper Ruud, but then lost to Musetti. Now, Musetti's a very talented player, but again, I have to be honest, on hard courts, we've just seen the next gen, he's not the force he is on clay courts. Not at the moment, anyway. He might get there, but he's not. And that's why he didn't make. No, I don't think he's even the semi-finals of the next gen finals. He's definitely not made the final. He's not featuring. So he, you could argue, isn't a gimme, but for someone of Casper Ruud's caliber who's just made the final of the US Open, and it's an indoor tournament, yes, the courts are a bit quicker. Yes, they're bouncing a bit lower. Maybe that doesn't quite fit his game as much as he would like, but that's a match he's expected to win. So he's lost there as well. So he's been in pretty adverse form, to say the least, honestly, in the last few weeks. I think there's probably been a bit of a come down after making a Grand Slam final. Probably the disappointment as well of losing a second Grand Slam final this year as well. I think this one he would have backed himself. He played against Nadal in France at Roland Garros, and he wouldn't have expected himself to win. I think the way that he came out after in the post-match, I think probably proved that. He wasn't really 100% backing himself really to go on to win that. He was more just happy to be there. But then the second Grand Slam final, he's got the experience of the first. He's playing against Alcaraz, who's also inexperienced. He came out, he looked very good from the off. Didn't look like he was nervy. He just ended up losing to the better player on the day. Now, that would have hurt and stung quite a bit in the end. So I do feel for him, and I can see why he's had, it's not a massive slump, but it's a dip in form for sure. So then how does he fare? Like, what happens in this matchup? Now, look, we're talking about two players in very different stages of form right now. Felix is red hot. He's red hot. I mean, yes, he lost the semis to Holger Rune, but as I said, he went on to win that Holger Rune. He's still extremely hot after winning 16 matches, 3 consecutive titles, all on indoor hards. So he is hot property right now. Casper Ruud is trying to find form. So what happens when they clash? Now, if the courts play as I expect, which I think they're going to play similar to the ATP Finals courts that were at the O2, they're going to be relatively quick. They're going to be lower bouncing. They're going to zip through. That will favor Felix. Of course it will. The other thing that's going to favor Felix, I genuinely feel like he loves the still conditions. I do think he likes playing outdoors as well. We've seen that this year as well. He's improved massively, not just on hard courts outdoors, but clay as well, which was an incredible thing to see. We've seen him have good results at Wimbledon last year, for example. So he has an all-court game, but I think he does enjoy the indoors, and he's enjoyed this swing. And I think the reason for that is it's just, you know what you're getting. And he has been serving bigger this year and hitting his spots. And when you go indoors, it just means you get more free points if you do that. You get more aces, get more unreturnables, because the balls are flying through, and it's like it just comes on a lot quicker. And as someone who, like, I've played on indoor hard courts, and I've been fortunate enough to play on like almost Grand Slam quality, like indoor hard courts, the serves just zip through a lot quicker than they do on, say, an outdoor hard court or an outdoor clay court. They really do. It's a big difference. It is. The ball comes on a lot quicker to you. but the bounce is slightly lower bouncing, but it's still enough that you're not comparing it to like a grass court, you're not, or a carpet court. You're not really comparing it to that. You're just comparing it to maybe a slightly less than an outdoor hard court, right? So there's still a fair amount of bounce there. And for Felix, who has also shored up his backhand side, he's just looked very good defensively. He's looked phenomenal the way he's been able to manipulate himself around the court. His foot movement has been really, really good. His triggers on return as well. And someone made a good comparison the other day, and it's not a complete like for like, but they said that Felix's return, so that the way that he returns, the technique, the style of return is very similar to Novak Djokovic. And they were questioning whether him and his coach, or maybe just his coach, or maybe it was just him, has looked at Djokovic and said, we're very athletic as well, like Djokovic, which Felix is. He's also pretty elastic as well. Now, I'm not going to say he is, as physically and, athletically gifted as Djokovic, but he's very, very close. So if he's very, very close, he can then mold his return on someone who's got a similar, physique to him. And he's gone with Djokovic. And who else is better to go upon than Djokovic in terms of molding your return game on? He is the best player, I think, for a righty to mold your return game on. If you're able to, do what Djokovic does, that is, if you have the attributes to be able to pull it off. I think Felix does. A lot of other players, like, for example, if we're talking about, say, Kyrgios, right? Incredibly talented. He's also very athletic, but he doesn't have the same type of athleticism as a Djokovic and a Felix. Yeah, that elastic ability as well. Yeah, elasticity in the legs. The splits, the way that they're able to kind of just contort their ankles, etc., as well, and get down very low. So he wouldn't be able to replicate Djokovic's return style effectively, but Felix is able to. It's a short backswing, stepping in, very compact. It's very, very good. And it's purely as well, like when I did the video on Djokovic's game style, it's also predominantly based on timing. Because of the short backswing, it's about timing deep down the middle, or you'll find an angle, cross court down the line, but every return needs to have a purpose. And you need to make it difficult for your opponents that their 1+ shot is not going to be able to hurt you, and you're at least at neutral. And that's what Djokovic is always looking to do. And I feel like that's what Felix is always looking to do nowadays. That's my opinion on it anyway. And what that's meant is that because he's serving so well, he's holding so easily for the most part. He's also coming forward nicely, and I like the way that he's tried to adopt the serve and volley at times, because he knows he's got a big enough serve to do that, to be able to come in and finish off the points early, to try and shorten points in an effective way by using his net play. His hands are good enough as well. He's able to manipulate the ball nicely on the forehand and backhand volley, very loose, and I like the way that he hits those volleys. And he's also adopted a drop shot as well, which has worked really nicely recently in the indoor hard courts when he's pushing people back. The into-out forehand's working nicely, and the backhand has become a lot more efficient. I think it's still a work in progress, but it's been good, and his backhand slice is working nicely. So overall, his game's looking very, very good. There's not a huge amount of holes in it, honestly. So for Casper Ruud, now he's going to have to serve very, very well. Now, he's not a huge server, but he can hit his spots. These courts will reward people who hit their spots, and he's going to have to do that. Now, in the past, what Casper probably would think to do is, I'm just going to go into the backhand side of Felix on my serves. I'm going to make sure that he's having to hit a lot of backhand returns. Now, we saw that against... we saw it against Holger Rune in Paris, but we also saw it against Holger Rune in Basel, and it didn't work because Felix's backhand return has improved a lot, and he actually hit quite a few backhand return winners, that is, against Holger Rune. Now, in Paris, it did work for the most part, and Holger Rune did really well. I think The difference is that Holger was very proactive. He came to the net a lot. Casper Ruud does, to be fair, also come to the net more than you would expect him to as someone of his stature, but he's not as proactive to come forward. And of course, unlike someone like Holger Rune, he doesn't have the weapon on the backhand side. Holger Rune is very solid on forehand and backhand, as we saw against Djokovic. There is a clear, defined weakness for Casper, which is the backhand. Now, it's definitely got better. We saw him hit some fantastic winners against Alcaraz in the US Open final on the backhand side. It's becoming less and less of a liability, but it's still not up to scratch. So we're going to see a lot of rallies in the backhand to backhand exchanges between Felix and Casper Ruud. And I imagine Felix will try and mix it up and go backhand slice, try and mix up the pace, try and give Casper Ruud as little pace as possible on the backhand side and try and get him to generate pace of his own. Because Casper Ruud on his backhand side, I'm not a massive fan of Casper Ruud's slice. And I think if Casper Ruud slices too much, Felix will have time. And he's so good at moving around his backhand and then hitting that into in forehand, and he will hurt you with it. Same with Casper Ruud, to be fair. He's also very good at doing it. But what I think is, on these quicker courts, I don't think Casper Ruud is going to want to open up his forehand side that much and expose himself that much. Whereas I think with Felix, he backs himself defensively to get across to that forehand side and hit a squash shot or a forehand slice or kind of get across there. Now, Casper Ruud is also very athletic. He's good at, gets around the court extremely efficiently and has wheels as well in terms of his legs. But I think Felix's legs are just a level above. So the question is, how does this one turn out? Now, I think, honestly, it's going to be very difficult for Ruud. I think personally, I think he's going to have to return. Say both players serve really well. Okay, I think Felix, in my opinion, is going to return well enough to give himself some opportunities in the return games. I can't necessarily say the same thing for Casper Ruud. I don't know if Casper Ruud has the ability against someone like Felix, who's serving as well as he is at the moment, hitting his spots with pace on a fast indoor hardcore. Is Casper Ruud able to negate that? I think on the forehand side, he probably can. But then again, you have to remember that he likes winding up the forehand. He's going to have to shorten it, or he's going to have, well, what he'll do is, which we've seen in return positions, is stand very, very far back. Now, what that then gives Felix an opportunity to do is then say, okay, well, I'm going to go out wide for a large portion on my first serves, and I'll come forward and finish the point off of the net, because Casper Ruud has to hit a phenomenal return from that far back, and he'll get dragged out most likely anyway and be in an awkward position. He'll make the return, but it just won't be a very effective one. So whether he tinkers with his return position and then kind of goes back and forward, depending on like trying to mess up Felix's serve game plan, but then does that in turn also mess up his return rhythm? Or does he say, you know what, I'm not going to stand so far back. I'm going to try and take the ball early. And if I need to block it back deep into play, then I'll do that. But at least I've, almost got it to neutral, depending on how, on where I've been able to place it. I might get to neutral. Whereas if I'm so far back, I'm almost a sitting duck, and Felix is able to come forward and he transitions really well, Felix. Then I'm going to struggle to even get into the point. So he has a decision to make there. And the issue I think he has is that even though the backhand has improved, and to be fair against Alcaraz on the second serve, he stepped in quite a bit on the backhand and had success. Alcaraz's serve is not as potent as Felix's, and I just think we're going to see a real test of his backhand on return. And if he's able to hit really deep returns into play and effective returns that get him to neutral, where he's then able to utilize his forehand, which, let's be honest, Casper Ruud's forehand is a big weapon, then I hold my hands up and I say, you know what? I was wrong. Casper Ruud has been able to be a lot more efficient on return than I expected. What he's also going to have to do, Casper Ruud, is something he's done very well all year, which is serve and hit spots. Not just hit spots, but then back it up with the forehand. His serve and forehand combination this year has been up there with the very best. It's been top 5 all year for the most part. And the forehand is just very, very good. not necessarily the biggest, but it's big enough, and he puts enough topspin on the ball to give himself enough margin, and then he hits his spots on the 1+ shot. Goes into out, goes into in, goes cross court, goes down the line. He makes sure that that really counts. He doesn't make a huge amount of errors on it either. So that then puts him in a good position. And then it's how does Felix defensively stay on the point? Can he defensively stay on the point? My answer is probably he will be able to, not for all the points, but he'll give himself enough points won in those situations to then open up some sort of breakpoint opportunity at some point in the match or set. For Casper, I just think it's a more an uphill battle, and I think it's a mixture of form, the surface being indoor hard court. I think it suits Felix more, and I think that's it, to be fair, because tactically, if we're talking on this from a clay court point of view, it's a very, very different matchup. It is. Even though Felix has improved a lot on clay, you'd back Casper Ruud, but on an indoor hard court, and given both players' form on indoor hard courts recently, it's very hard to back against Felix. So I'm going to go for Felix in straight sets, actually, which might be a bold claim, but that's what I'm going to go for. Let me know your predictions. Let me know if you agree as well with my preview, or do you think I missed something, or do you think that actually you disagree with something I said? Let me know. It's always interesting to hear your guys' thoughts as well on my analysis before and after matches. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you very much for tuning in as always, and we'll see you very, very soon.